Did you know that the Greek word for horse is hippo? That's right, a horse is a hippo. Now, back in ancient Greek times, many famous people, even Hippocrates, talked about the relationship between riding and the human body. Now, fast forward to the 60s, and riding becomes an official therapeutic practice. And since then, equine and hippotherapy, we all know now, that means horse therapy, has grown from a simple riding to therapeutics that include occupational, speech, and cognitive behavioral therapy, plus a plethora of other things that they're treating. Today, Dana Butler-Moburg, she's the CEO of the Shea Center of Therapeutic Riding, she joins us. And their story started way back in the 70s, but today they're now one of the top equine assistant therapy centers in the world. Last year, they had over 1,400 participants in their various programs, and they treated over 75 distinct disabilities. Now, Dana tells so many inspiring stories with such an emotional impact, you actually feel it right to your core. I felt it. I really felt it. Now, imagine this. You have a child or a loved one that's been diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and you decide to put them on a horse, and then you watch them on that horse and that empowerment it gives them, and the pride and joy it brings to both of you. Think about it. Now, there's so much in this episode today, and if you know someone that might benefit from this amazing therapy, please take a listen, and maybe you'll have some encouraging information to pass on. And get ready for another informative and heartwarming episode. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange. Losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, I've got a really great guest. I've been dying to meet her for a lot of reasons, because as everybody knows that listens, kids come really close to my heart, and they do a lot of things. I've got Dana Butler-Moburg with me, and she's from the Shea Center for Therapeutic Riding. Dana, thanks so much for taking the time, and I just want to introduce you to everybody, and then we can kind of dig into the history of the center and what you guys do and why you do it and the benefits and all that other stuff.
Sounds great.
Well, first off, let's get into your background. I know you're the CEO of the center, and you've been there for a long time. How did you get involved? And I want to dig into equine therapy and all that kind of stuff, but let's talk about you, and then that way everybody gets to know you, and we can actually dig into what we're going to talk about.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be on your podcast, and thank you for what you're doing. It's really exciting to see the stories and listen. I was that horse crazy kid, and my parents didn't have any money to deal with that, and so I grew up in the Seattle area, and so I became a working student at a local barn when I was 12 years old. And I would clean 20 stalls a day to sit my 1 hour in the saddle. And it was heaven.
Yeah.
It was just heaven. So I'd spend all my Saturdays doing that. And as I got older and better at what I was doing with the horses, I began to be more valuable to riding the horses. And so I was a dressage rider then, still am. And so I rode horses and helped train them from the time I was about 14 till I was 18. As a working student, and then went to school at the University of Washington. And my horse passion never died off, but I had to do some other things first. And then I ended up moving to Southern California. My husband was a car designer here. And so I thought, well, okay, what can I do here? And I worked in nonprofits, which I love. I love what nonprofits can do for people. And then I got back into horses, and somebody called me and said, there's an opening for an executive director at this place called the Joswick Center. And so I called, and thankfully they hired me. And so it's been a wonderful time. I've been there 26 years. And during that time, we have rebuilt our facility. We have grown to really significant levels, and serving more people and children with disabilities, adults with disabilities. And it's been an incredibly gratifying time to be of service to this wonderful organization.
Well, first of all, you're down in San Juan Capistrano, which is one of the most pretty places in Southern California there is, and of course, it's famous for the swallows that come in and all that stuff. Here's something that I didn't tell you when we were talking prior to this. I went to school in Corvallis.
Oh, Oregon.
Yeah, but I grew up in Southern California. So you went south, I went north to go to school, and then I came back there. Now, of course, I'm in Texas. But yeah, so I went to school up there. I played sports up there. So I've been up in your part of the woods many times. I've suffered the rain.
Yes, it is perennial. It's just constantly gray. We get those maybe 2.5, 3 months of brilliant sunshine, and it just sort of keeps you hanging on long enough. And then it comes back to the gray and the wet, although there's nothing like the Northwest. It's so beautiful and so lush and so green.
It's beautiful. I love it up there.
Yes. We're though we kind of have the best of all worlds here in Southern California, because we've got the mountains that are just an hour and a half away. We've got the ocean that's just 45 minutes away, and it's just sunny and beautiful. So we love it all, but we do get to have kind of the best of all worlds.
Yeah, well, you're blessed. It's funny when I'm in Texas, when the weather's really nice because we have the humidity. Moving from California to Texas was an eye opener to say the least. But there are days I go, God, this is California weather. I'm always doing that because I miss the weather, but I do love Austin as well. So let's talk a little bit about the facility. Now, I know a little bit of the history. I know it started in 1978. Want to kind of walk me through that, and let's kind of get up to today. And some of the numbers are pretty astounding where you guys are now.
Well, it's interesting because our founder, there's a family, and our first executive director were the founders, and she was an equestrian. Her name was Fran Joswick, amazing, amazing woman, social worker by training. And she was just had this vision to serve people with disabilities. And therapeutic riding started in this century in Europe.
Right.
And there was an amazing woman, Liz Hartel, who was the first woman to win an Olympic medal in equestrian sports. And she did so as a person with survived polio and is paralyzed below both knees. So it was really an extraordinary feat, and the riding really helped restore her, and she helped get going in Europe this idea that horses could really be of help to people. And so Liz Hartel got this going, and then Fran Joswick and several other women really brought it to the US in the 60s. And in 1978, Derek and Nancy Lewis were reading at the Parade magazine, when that used to be a thing in the newspapers, and they read about therapeutic riding. And so they got started in Orange County, and we got going. And we had one horse, one client, one family, and Fran. And the determination of these folks to create something that would be lasting is really just substantial. And what we found over all these years is that we started when I was there. We had 2 construction trailers, and we were sitting on a couple of acres, and we were serving probably about 81 to 100 people a week. But and just had 4 full-time staff, and then maybe 80 to 90 volunteers. So it was a big labor of love, because what's happened over these many years is we eventually had our land donated to us. We mounted a capital campaign, and now we sit on 8 acres, and we are able to serve 330 plus clients a week. About 1,500 people came to the Shea Center last year. We have a very robust veterans services program, and we work with combat vets with PTSD. And I explain to people that we're like a big therapy clinic on 8 acres. We have physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and mental health services. And I love that we've been able to continue to grow to meet the needs of persons with disabilities throughout Orange County. And the majority of our clients are kids. And then throughout these many years, we've also been trainers for our industry. So there's a Shea trained instructor in nearly every state in the US and 16 countries around the world.
Wow, I didn't know that. One of the things when I was looking at, what you guys have there, you actually have classes that you're, like you said, you were training people too, but you have classes for physical therapy, not just on the horses, but you're doing a bunch of other stuff there too, along with the equine therapy, correct?
Well, we meet the client at their level of need. And so if we have an individual who's going to benefit from traditional therapy as well as what we're doing with the horse, we may start in our clinical setting to help people be more prepared when they ride, or maybe after they ride, the riding has helped create some looser muscles or stronger muscles or more attention. And then we may finish that activity with them in the more clinical setting. So we really are able to meet the individual at their level of need. And so that just means having this wonderful facility that includes the more traditional therapy settings, as well as this incredible equine setting where we have the barn and the covered arenas and just this beautiful Southern California weather. It really offers us a wide, if you will, palette of things, services that we can offer to help improve our clients' lives. What we want is for each individual to leave more independent, more with more strength, more ability, more knowledge, and so every single person has an individual program that is set up for them. We evaluate each person with one of our medical professionals, and then we figure out where in our continuum of services is going to be the best for that individual to progress. And you'd be surprised at the wide range of services that we can offer. We served 87 different types of disabilities last year, but we really think of these individuals as what can they do? What are your abilities versus your disabilities?
What the potential is. I like the term palette. I think that's a really good term to use, is that because you guys are doing so much more. When I was talking to Sarah about helping the horses as well, is pretty crazy too. That story about the fireman getting the horse out of the valley or whatever that was.
Yes, it's an interesting thing. Incorporating and having the horses in our lives is really transformational for them too. But there's a myth that often exists about the type of horses that work in these programs, and it's that, oh, this is just, poor snowflake just can't really do much work anymore. We'll send them over to that therapeutic riding center. It's actually the opposite. We have our horses come to us, and they may be transitioning from a different career, but they are sound in walk, trot, and canter because our clients need them to be strong and sound of body and mind. So it's really important for our horses to be comfortable for their jobs. And so we use dressage, which is the Olympic sport where it looks like the horse and rider are dancing together. It's not the jumping sport, but rather
No.
everything is on the flat. And and it basically helps our horses keep their minds and bodies really fit for the work they do with our clients. We provided more than 17,000 hours of services to our clients last year. So we have about 28 horses in our program. And I say about because on any given day, there may be a horse that's getting ready to retire, or we have a horse that's coming in. So we're very, very fortunate in that regard. So the horses are that integral part of what we do, and they are an absolutely extraordinary component. People think of the different breeds of horse. They don't realize that each horse that's in our barn has a totally different movement from the next horse. So we match the horse's movement to the client's need. For example, if I have a kid who's really energetic, person with ADHD, busy, just on the go, bright, talkative, has trouble focusing, I'm not going to put that individual on the really gentle, soft moving horse because the client that we're talking about is craving a lot of input and motion. And so by giving them this, a little pony maybe that has a nice choppy gait or a really brisk, movement, that's going to help this individual settle and get calmer and more focused so that they can go to school and be more focused and they can have better conversations. And, our goal is to help you be your best, most able self. If I have a little one whose muscles are very weak, say from cerebral palsy, uh, I'm not going to use that choppy pony yet. I might have to start with a horse who has a very fluid, gentle, not a lot of movement in their back. The amplitude of the motion is much decreased. So we choose carefully the size and amount of movement and type of movement based on what that individual needs.
Well, one of the things I wrote this down that I was reading. By the way, I have one of those ADHD kids for myself at home. Anyways, he's not at home anymore, but he was one of those that needed that. So I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget it and speak it specifically. So it says horses are social animals that can perceive emotions and their environment and it helps with human awareness. So they're more aware, and that's why these horses tend to work better with the different individuals.
Yes, there's some really interesting studies that came out of the UK a few years ago that measured the energy field of a horse's heart. As you know, the heart is an electromagnetic organ.
Yeah.
And so they measured the energy field of a horse's heart, and it's 3 meters in diameter.
Wow.
And so that's a very large space. And what that does also is that energy field, the horse's resting heart rate is between 30 and 40 beats a minute. And so that slow resting heart rate, when you get the energy field of, of a human heart in that space, what happens from from a physiological standpoint is it begins to decelerate the heart of the person. And
That calms them down. Wow.
yes, the horse is an incredibly, incredibly perceptive animal, and in nature, the horse is a prey. Is prey.
Right.
They're not predators, and so their defense mechanisms are very refined. Their ears are incredibly perceptive. They can sense motion. Their eyes, when they put their heads down, the horse has an incredibly wide field of vision because they're grazing animals, so it allows them to graze and see the world around them. They're flight animals. So any of these things that trigger with sound or motion or their safety and security is to run away. So here we are with people with disabilities, and we are using the very best of our horses' gifts to serve our clients. And with our veterans, especially those who are dealing with PTSD, they may be living in a hypervigilant state, and which is often the case for persons who are experiencing PTSD. And being with the horse does several things. It makes them present. And there are activities that we'll do with the veteran with the horse, where the horse is simply loose in what we call a round pen,
Mm-hmm.
and the horse will read the energy of the individual. They may be on the outside saying, yeah, I'm calm, I'm good, I feel great. But on the inside, they're not. They're really struggling. And the horse will sense that incongruency and they will reflect it back. So if you have somebody who's dealing with tremendous stress on the outside, they're trying to keep it together, but they go in, the horse will sense that incongruency from the elevated heart rate, from how somebody's presenting themselves, their body language. So all those things that make the horse what they are become the massively powerful tools that we are able to harness to help our clients. And the therapeutic equestrian horse is a very different horse from, say, a marvelous competition horse that maybe is in the Western world and they're reining, or their cutting horse, or their jumping horse. Those horses are wired. We've had those horses in our program after they've had that career, but our horses learn to tolerate people in higher states and not feed off of that and have it elevate them. Sometimes horses will elevate if somebody has an elevated state, but we teach our horses to be calm. And when something startles them, we teach them to stand still versus run away. They're very different horses from, say, a barn of big competition horses. But all those gifts that nature gives them to survive are the gifts that help our clients thrive.
Yeah, another thing that I'd read, it says, they give humans a sense of connection and a greater sense of purpose. And so I'm wondering, thinking about what you were talking about, the magnetic field or electric field, do you think they're reading the field from the humans, aside from the heart rate? Do you think, because they're sitting on it, they can probably feel the heart rate, but I think is that what they're saying too, that they're actually reading that they're elevated, they're stressed out, so their heart rate's higher? Do you think they're reading that?
Well, my 50 years of work with horses has shown me that they sense so much more than we could ever understand. And so, even though I've spent so much time with these magnificent animals, they're incredibly perceptive, and they have to have the right temperament for this work. This isn't the right job for every horse.
Sure.
And so they do have these extraordinary senses, and they do read the situation. Interestingly, our horses also know when they're working with somebody who is a client and has some needs versus when one of our neurotypical staff are exercising them. And I remember years ago, we had this grand old Appaloosa horse who had competed in higher level dressage. And whenever he had a rider on his back, he was just never took a wrong step, took care of his rider, understood what his job was. And then every once in a while, if one of the staff or a guest instructor who was getting trained would get on his back, he would make them work for their ride. And he clearly understood his job. And that's something that I see in all of our horses, is they really do understand their job, and that's what they're there for.
So let's talk a little bit more about the horses. So as an example, so when you get horses, are they donated pretty much? Is that how you get them first off? Is that
Well, pre-pandemic, I would have said that largely they're donated.
right?
But the pandemic hit, and for the first time in our history, we had to start purchasing horses, which is always a risky thing. Horse trading gets its, you know, bad name for a reason. But interestingly, during the pandemic, there were some ways to acquire horses that popped up that were actually very efficient and very helpful. So the majority of our horses in the barn have been donated, and they've come after they've had careers in other areas, or maybe somebody just loves their horse so much and they wanted to buy a different horse. And so we're lucky enough to acquire a younger horse. The average age of our horses in the barn is generally hovers around 11 years old.
Hmm.
We've had some younger, and we've had some that are older. It all depends on their health and well-being. And so we are so privileged that Richard Markell, he's a horse veterinarian, and he's also the team vet for the Olympic jumping team, or has been. And he donates his services to the Shea Center, and has for 25 years. So they get this extraordinary treatment. So we maintain them so well. I mean, it's a great gig. They have dental, they have chiropractic. I mean, they've got medical. And it's a very, very loving, thoughtful care that they get from us to do their jobs.
Well, like I had I did a deal with an episode with a group that get they rescued dogs, and then they're called medical mutts. So they work with PTSD, but they also the animals can tell when people are having a seizure and that. But sometimes they bring the dogs on when they rescue, and they just don't. They're not able to do the job they want them to do. Do you get that as well? You have some horses that just don't. They're just end up not being as doing what you need them to do.
Super question. Yes, because it may not be what the horse wanted.
They have their own personality too.
They do. They absolutely do. And we choose those personalities based on the client needs. So we have some of our horses that are a little more sensitive. And so we may match them with, for example, a veteran because of the nature of a horse. We have clients who might have a little more trouble controlling their muscles and they're independent riders. So we'll have a horse who's a little less of a go pedal, and they can, tolerate input from the client that may not mean to give. So all of them they're 28 completely different personalities. They're absolute individuals.
Well, it's like having kids. You can have three kids, they're all different personalities, but they've got some commonality generally.
Absolutely. And the commonality of these horses is understanding the nature of the horse.
Right.
Some of the things I spoke to earlier. And then understanding how a horse might see the world. We had one horse who it took us a while, but for whatever reason, a puddle on the ground was a crisis for this horse. And who knows why. So we had, to carefully help him get used to getting bathed and having water on his feet if it's a warm day, which it often is in California. We'll host the horses and help keep them cool, but he found that so distressing. And so it's our job to understand how to help him be okay with that. All horses come with their own sensitivities and their own needs.
So you're giving the horses therapy along with everybody else coming to get therapy as well.
Sometimes that's true.
I probably need a lot of it actually. But anyways, so if you get a horse that just doesn't do the program, and then what do you do? Do you find homes for it? How does that work?
Well, every horse who comes into the program is there on a 90-day trial.
Okay.
So first, before we even take a horse into the program, we will talk with the owner. We'll look at vet records. We'll make sure that they have that the horse's health is something that we can manage. For example, if a horse has had an incidence of where they may have a metabolic disorder and they've had laminitis. For your listeners that understand the horse world, laminitis is a very disabling issue and condition, and so they don't know what causes it, and so we may or may not take a horse in that's had those issues. So we assess that first, and then once the horse is cleared by Dr. Markell, and we have, we've looked at videos, and if the horse is nearby, we'll go test ride the horse. Then we'll bring them in on a 90-day trial, and we'll introduce them to all the things that make our world unique. And during that 90 days, they'll meet, mobility devices like wheelchairs and walkers, and they'll learn to stand quietly in our mounting ramp area so that the persons can mount and dismount safely. So we take them through a checklist and we introduce them to the work we do.
Right.
And by and large, our success rate has gone up a great deal given how carefully we pre-screen. And so, yes, there are horses who retire from the program after they've served with us for a long time. And we have an arrangement with a retirement facility where they go and live a very good life. The ideal for us is to have a horse return to a loving home. And we do have a few of those horses in the barn right now that when their service is done with us, their owners or donors want them to come home and be with them. So At any continuum, our horses are given absolute, impeccable, and loving care.
One thing for the listeners out there too, what most people don't realize when you think of California, you don't think about horse areas. But if you look in Orange County and northern San Diego County, there's tons of horse farms out there, Rancho Santa Fe and all that other stuff too. There's a ton of horse property out in California. Most people don't know that if they don't live in California.
It's surprising, and the value of land is so extraordinary in Southern California that you may not have the big rolling hills and large spaces that some other states might have, but there are some truly stunning horse facilities in Orange County and in northern San Diego County as well, and Los Angeles County. That kind of is that. These are some of the areas that encompass Southern California.
Well, then especially get up into Central California too, the Central Coast. There's a tons of horse ranches up there. But so when you have the horses and you get them, and so when you have them for that 90-day training or trial period, they go through extensive training. How many hours a day? I mean, is there any standard? Like, do you guys have like a standard training program, or how does that work?
Yes, another great question. So, in the United States, we have the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International,
Path.
PATH. And we are a PATH Premier Accredited Center, which means that we not only comply with an extensive set of standards that include administrative, how we teach, how we keep records. It also means how we treat our horses. So, per our PATH standards, our horses may work 1 3-hour, if you will, shift, and then have an hour off, and then another 3-hour shift. That might seem like a lot, but most of our work is done in the walk, although we do have independent riders who may trot and canter.
Mm-hmm.
So our horses, they're in their stalls and they come out. Usually their day starts with exercise with one of our staff so that they are strong and comfortable and get to move. Horses must move. These are movement animals. They're grazing animals. They're meant to be moving. And stalls are, Southern California, as I mentioned, has expensive real estate. Ideal is to have horses that get to be out on a pasture and then just moving all the time. The way we've set up our horse systems is that we have this wonderful Euro walking device that the horses go out every day and they get to walk for half an hour just on their own in the Euro walker. And then they get their exercise, and then they may serve their clients for the day. And I'm going to say our horses on average, I would say probably do 4 hours a day each for the ones that work the most.
Mm-hmm.
And the minimum our horses tend to work is about 10 hours a week. And given that we're operating 6 days a week, that's not a real heavy work schedule. So they have their work schedule. They go out, they serve our clients. They have 3 meals a day. It's have 7 in the morning, noon, and 6 at night. So they're nice and spaced out because the horse's digestive system is meant to have long periods and multiple feedings. So they really have the best we can do in terms of their activity level.
Well, I got to believe they'd appreciate it because, like we said earlier, they're social animals. It's the same with dogs. Dogs like to go for a walk all the time. They're social. They want to be out and do things. So, 4 hours doesn't seem, and the number may seem like a lot, but that's not if you're social. You want to be out hanging out with people or other horses.
Exactly. And our facility was designed in such a way. Dr. Markell weighed in on the design of our barn several years ago. And our barn is amazing. It takes advantage of the winds that come up in the afternoons because we're not far from the ocean. So we get these nice winds in the afternoons. And then they're all open. So all the horses can see each other. And in several of the stalls, they can actually touch and nuzzle. Sometimes you'll see horses playing. And then there's also little turnouts where they can go and have a nice time just to be out in the sun and enjoy their friends, enjoy their neighbors. So it takes advantage of that social and helps meet that social need that the horses have.
It's like you said earlier, you're giving some therapy to the horses, and of course you're giving therapy to the people that are coming there, the people that are looking for help. But it's a team effort at the end of the day.
It is, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about hippotherapy. Now, I did a little bit of reading on it. What at first I kept thinking about, hippotherapy because we're helping people for whatever they're trying to help them with. But I've immediately thought about a Hippocratic oath, but it's really not because hippo is, by the way, everybody, I did some research. Hippo is actually the Greek word for horse, which I didn't know.
That is absolutely correct. So the horse moves the human body just like it's walking.
Right.
And so there's no Swiss ball or piece of gym equipment that actually provides that movement, and that random movement through space is really important because it provides the ability for our horses to move, and they're moving in these large arenas. And so what happens then is the therapist, whether it's an occupational therapist or physical therapist or speech and language pathologist, they take advantage of that movement and how that movement affects the rider's body. It's not unusual to see a child sitting sideways or sitting backwards on the horse, standing on the horse. Each of these postures is chosen to help develop a set of muscles or get a certain reaction that we're working on from that client. So if I sit you backwards on the horse, what happens is that it tips your pelvis down, and it makes your back muscles pull you upright. So for clients who may be kind of hunched over in their posture, the
Mhm.
term is kyphosis. If I turn you backwards on the horse, that automatically makes your body sit up straight,
Oh,
and it makes your core have to reach up. If you're weak in your core strength, we may have you sitting in these different postures. So that really helps. The horse's movement is chosen on how it will impact the client. And for our clients, now, when you think about speech, our speech and language pathologist explained to me one time that for speech, it takes hardware and software to produce speech. And the hardware is the muscles. So for you and I to be talking, we have to be able to sustain pushing air through our voice and through our lungs, and sustaining that. Some of our clients, that's really tough. So we have to build up the muscles and the ability to keep speaking. And that's the hardware side of it. Now the software side of it
mhm.
is being in our environment is incredibly motivating. A lot of our clients really love and crave the movement that the horse provides. And so if you learn to say go, that means you're going to get more movement. And if you learn to say whoa, it means you'll get the horse to stop. You can't underestimate the fact that for some of these children and adults, they may not have a lot of control over their world. And
Right.
not all of our clients are persons who are dealing with cognitive challenges. And so it may just be a physical challenge or a cognitive or both. So the self-esteem that comes from being able to be in control of your world is really key. But we harvest and harness that movement of the horse to really impact the rider to be their very best. You'll see us having the therapist will be doing things with toys, like they might be playing catch. So that's part of the horse's orientation, is that we help them learn to tolerate having things
Thrown out.
gently tossed back and forth to the client. You might see them laying down on the horse because that total movement into the client's body may be what their body needs and craves.
Right.
So it's an extraordinary thing, because not only do you have to be an exceptional therapist, but you also have to be an exceptional horse person. And it's not just any staff member that can walk in with this wonderful training that they get and be effective. You also have to go through hundreds of hours of training to become effective at utilizing the horse's motion to affect your client.
We have to be aware, when you were talking about that, it gave me goosebumps because I literally, because if you think about somebody who's got whatever the disability or disorder they have and they don't have any control, even to be able to tell the horse stop and be able to be the person controlling that, how powerful that must be for them.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
It is. And we don't realize that if you're a person who uses a wheelchair full time and you are constantly looking up at the world. And the other thing, too, about persons who use wheelchairs full time is that the fact that we get up and walk around, if we're neurotypical, our bodies need that. And the same is true for persons who use mobility devices, especially if they spend most of their day in a wheelchair. It's very healthy for their bodies to get different movement patterns and different input. So we're able to work with persons who have paralysis. They have to have a sitting balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, people always ask me, since Mr. Reeves' accident.
Well, I was literally thinking about him as you were speaking. I swear to God.
Exactly. Well, I get that question, and Mr. Reeves' accident was very traumatic, and he had to live life on a ventilator.
He was pretty much paralyzed from neck down.
That was what my understanding was.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that injury is too high of a spinal cord injury.
Uh-huh.
And so we have standards. Again, these are our path standards. We have standards that we adhere to. And we also have things, contraindications. So if somebody, for example, has uncontrolled seizures, it generally is contraindicated to riding because you don't want to have a seizure and then,
Sure.
be riding. And there are certain contraindications that are there. If you have very severe osteoporosis, for example, it may be a contraindication to riding. Although we have had clients who have osteoporosis or very brittle bones if they're kids.
Mm-hmm.
We are more inclusive than exclusive. So, but we also then have to make sure that we choose all the right setting. Something we haven't talked about yet is the volunteerism component.
Yeah, you've got so many. Let's talk about that. I was going to ask you anyways.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to your question about therapy. So when you see a client on horseback at the Shea Center, you may see two volunteers on either side of the horse. We call those sidewalkers. And you may see somebody leading the horse. That's a leader. So there's three volunteers already working with and supporting the therapist who then may be doing the actual treatment. And so we couldn't do what we do without having these extraordinary volunteers. We have about 330 clients a week. And then from a volunteer standpoint, we're looking at upwards of 200 volunteers a week. So it's extraordinary the role that they play in, first, the client's safety, and then second, the success of their treatments and experiences. Our volunteers become an integral part of our clients' well-being. And I love seeing the just truly breathtakingly wonderful relationships that form between our volunteers and they call them my client. There's so much ownership and love there.
Well, one of the things that I tell people all the time, we were talking prior to recording, I do a lot of volunteering work all over the world, but it's therapy for me too.
You're exactly right.
It's major therapy. I always tell people one of the things when I'm there, even if I'm only gone for 2 or 3 weeks, which is a long time in the real world sometimes, but I know that I'm not making a huge impact on the people I'm there. I'm realizing I'm probably getting more than they're getting from me being there. Because then you come back and you realize, oh, woe is not me when you leave saying, oh, my life is crazy, and you come back. I'll bet you a lot of those volunteers feel the exact same way.
I've been so privileged to spend my working life at Shea and before Shea with volunteers, and people they all say that very same thing. They get exponentially more than they give. And I always tell people, if maybe volunteering for the Shea Center isn't your thing, maybe volunteering at your church isn't your thing, but find something,
Right.
find a way to contribute, because it does take you outside of yourself. And there's really nothing like knowing that you are making a difference in some way that matters to you. I was a couple that live in our neighborhood that have a fascinating thing that they do, and they started it as a volunteer thing. Then they basically take medical supplies around the country and around the world, and they got lit up and excited about the fact that they attach suitcases to travelers going to different parts of the world,
Mhm.
and and these travelers take an extra suitcase filled with medical supplies, and they link that person up to somebody who's at a clinic near where they're traveling to. There's so many ways to volunteer and change the world.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love that aspect of what we do. And we not only have volunteers in our lessons, we have our volunteer board of directors, we have volunteers who help do fundraising. You can change the lives of people so deeply through your commitment to serve. And it just can be what is meaningful to you. And I'm so privileged to see that day in, day out, year in, year out. And I just love that aspect of what we do. We would not survive. Our entire industry across the country would not survive without volunteers.
Well, when I think about the family, they had their son had cerebral palsy, but do you think about their journey? One is it helped him. I think his name is Michael, if I remember the name.
Our founding family,
Yeah,
you got a great memory. Yes, Michael. Uh-huh.
and what I thought about it is, and I always talk about this on the show, is you never know where the journey is going to take you. My life has taken me to be on a podcast, which nobody in their life right mind would have thought I'd be on a podcast, but it's taken me all over the place. And think about what they created way back in the late '70s and where it is today, but in how many people is affected. Not only the people that you're helping or the horses that are involved, but all the volunteers over the years, all these different people. It's pretty amazing when you kind of dig into all that kind of stuff.
I had it. And so you mentioned something that brings me back to just a remarkable experience I had some years ago. About 4 years ago, I was at a doctor appointment at a low income clinic in Long Beach, and I was helping a family who has a child with disabilities. And I was helping advocate for the child and help get appointments and organize. So I was there in the background, just being there to help. And I was with mom, and she had two of her four children with her, and the one was getting evaluated by this pediatrician. And the pediatrician every once in a while would look over at me like she was trying to figure something out. And at the end of the exam, she said, "Do you work at the Shea Center?" I said, "Yeah, I do." She said, "Well, I'm so and so, and my sister and I said, "You were volunteers of the year, two of you, about 15 years ago." She said, "You remember us?" I said, "Now I do." And she said, "I became a pediatrician because of my experiences at the Shea Center."
Wow, that's awesome.
And she said, "And my sister became a nurse because of her experiences at the Shea Center." And I've just never forgotten that moment where, you just don't know the impact that you're having.
Right.
And the same is true for the kids and for our adults, because you just don't know the impact that you're having when you're there with the child or a parent. We had a parent speak at an event we had this past Sunday, and she was speaking to that issue. She said, "You have no idea how much you change the lives of families as a whole, because it's so hard. We love," and it wasn't an expression of, it's not that we don't love our kid, but it's so hard to be dealing with some of the issues that our families deal with. And it's not just the individual that has the issue, it's the whole family.
Sure.
So and she was really, and I've heard this for all these years, is just how much it changes the lives of a family when their loved one is so successful and is making progress. And they're at this beautiful place. The Shea Center is a beautiful place. And some of our families have said, sometimes I'm in a cramped waiting room with a bunch of other parents, and you're just kind of not really getting anything for yourself. There's no restoration. And this one parent said, when I come to the Shea Center, I can sit down, I can take a nap in the sun, I can work because we have guest Wi-Fi, I can watch my child being successful, I can just rest for an hour and restore. And the impact that people have as volunteers, as staff, the whole place, we're really helping the entire family.
Well, what anybody that's a parent that's ever been had kids, and we're just talking about kids that just go through normal childhood, the enormity of somebody having a child that has some disability or whatever disorder, being a parent's not easy to begin with. And you couple with that and to have some kind of, I'm going to use the term sanctuary, where you can actually go and take a deep breath and kind of, recharge a little bit. It's got to mean a lot.
That's exactly why we built and rebuilt the Shea Center the way we did, is to be a sanctuary
Yeah.
and to be a place for everybody to experience just, peace. And that's a goal for us. During the day, we are this busy, lots of little people, school age people. Mornings, we may see adults, but when school gets out, my gosh, we are so busy. And Saturdays is just crazy busy with kidlets and young adults too. There's a whole component of the fact that we have young people who've been with us for quite some time. But in the evenings, we become something even different, because this is when we'll see our veterans
Yeah.
and the programs we do. And the Shea Center takes on a different feel throughout the whole day. It's a beautiful place, no matter what time of the day, but it has a different feel.
Well, there's goes back to your term palette.
Yeah, there's a palette of experiences, of colors and shades and experiences that are available to people. The same is true as volunteers. I teach one client a week, actually two, but I teach one client a week. He's been with us as I'm also a certified therapeutic riding instructor. And my main job as the CEO is not being in the arena, but it is a calling. And so I have this one kid he started as a little person with us. He was 4 when he came to the Shea Center, and he's 19 now.
That's crazy.
And in the pandemic, we needed more instructors because we needed to keep our class sizes smaller
Right.
to just make the risk of, transmission. And I'm an advanced instructor in terms of the skill sets that I have. So I was super excited. I got to start teaching Colt. And he's now a fully independent rider. He comes, he gets his own horse ready. He's got a great eye. He's the most loving, special person. And I just so feel privileged to work with him. But we are his community. We are part of, I went to his high school graduation, and we celebrated his 18th birthday. And, and his mom, they're a military family. And so they receive the benefits that we offer to military families and veterans. And it's just an extraordinary thing to see Colt succeeding and to see us pushing him to succeed,
Right.
so that those things carry outside of Shea, and it transforms the whole family.
Yeah, well, it does. I mean, you can, the advantage I have of doing what I do, and that is you see the transformation for everybody. It really does.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just this amazing thing. Are you familiar with the Gentle Barn?
Yes, I love the Gentle Barn. I follow them on social media.
So Ellie Lax is the one that runs that. I've been there, but we did an episode with her, and I had followed her too, and she's got a new book that just came out, but she had a book before, and her story is a pretty amazing story. They're on a different journey, but it's a similar journey that you guys are doing in a different way.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And anybody called to do this kind of work that involves animals, that involves service. While it may look different, there are some great commonalities, and that dedication and devotion to serving animals is a common theme. At Shea, we are serving our clients with disabilities, but we have no less love and dedication and devotion to our horses. So we make sure, that's why we talked earlier, we make sure that they do have safe homes, loving homes to return to if that's possible. And if not, we are their guardians and care and make sure that they have a safe and a happy place to retire.
Well, it's just the whole thing you guys are doing amazing, and I know we're kind of sort of running out of time. So here, I've got a couple questions I want to ask, so to help people out there. So I know you treat a variety of different things, and some people just aren't. You may hear about equine therapy for people, but I know you've got, like you said, 83. I think is the number of different things you treated last year. For people that are trying to find something, is there ones that you treat more than others? Or, I'm just trying to help whoever may have a friend that has somebody, that they have a child, or they have an adult that may be able to benefit from this kind of therapy. Can you kind of dig into that a little bit? I know that's pretty broad, but you know,
So generally, we as an industry, we're more inclusive than exclusive. So as nationwide, there are about 800 centers. In that 800, there's only 300 that are premier accredited centers. And those are those of us who go through a peer review to prove that we adhere to safety standards. And they don't have to be huge. Shea is the largest from a monetary standpoint, and the majority of our centers are nonprofits. So
Mhm.
it takes $7.3 million a year to fuel what we do at the Shea Center. But our industry has wonderful centers around the country. You can find a center near you by going to the Path International website, and that's pathintl.org. And Shea Center is Shea Center, SHEA, center.org. So once, and then when you think about how to assist people, the number one issues that we treat are persons on the spectrum. Though we treated 87 different types of disabilities, our top five are persons on the spectrum, persons who have a genetic disorder, persons with cerebral palsy, persons who PTSD, and then we also have treated, and in that top category also would be persons with Down syndrome.
Yeah, I'm glad. I would literally was just going to ask you that. I read that you were doing Downs, which I thought was, how can you not want to help children that have Downs, which I think is amazing. So they must just be, talk about innocence. I love any person I ever met with Downs. They're just the kindest, nicest people ever. you know,
There are some wonderful traits that are common for persons who have Down syndrome, but there is a trait that we have to screen for people who have Down syndrome, which is why the medical release is so important for our clients. Persons who have Down syndrome can have weak vertebrae in the neck.
right.
And so we'll screen for that. And there's a big, long medical term for it, but we'll screen for that first. So if you're listening and you think, gosh, my kid might need some help, the thing is that you don't have to have a formal diagnosis. If you are not yet at that point where you are understanding what your child's needs are, you might have an IEP at school, that's individual education plan, but you don't have to wait for that. The minimum age we see as an industry is age 2, and age 2 has to be seen. 2 and 3-year-olds have to be seen by our medical staff, and then at age 4, they could go to one of our adaptive riding specialists who's a non-medical person like me. But so this is why also I recommend the premier accredited centers, because they adhere to a level of safety and protocol that is, there's a lot of safety in that.
Well, that makes sense.
And you can just call your local center. You can find your center on the PATH website and find centers near you, and it will highlight if it's premier accredited center. And most of them are nonprofits, so they rely on donations of time, treasure, talent, and ties. And you just never know what home you're going to find for yourself and for your loved one when you enter into this world of equine assisted services.
Okay, was that the three T's: time, treasure, and ties? Is that what you
Time, treasure, talent, and ties.
said? Four T's.
Yes, yeah.
I caught that.
That's what it takes to keep us going.
That's great. So here, while we're still talking, I know we're pushing our time limit, but let's as we mentioned earlier, by giving you get a lot. So how can people, if they don't have somebody that they're there, but they want to give back to you, how can they help you guys out? In what ways can they do that? If they're in Southern California, is there a way to be a volunteer? Can they donate money and all that stuff? Let's talk a little bit about.
Sure. All of the things that we just mentioned in those four T's. Your time, if you want to volunteer, go to sheacenter.org and there's a button that says volunteer, and we'll get you going on your volunteerism. If you are able to share of your treasure and you're excited about the work we do with children, with veterans, with volunteerism, we also serve older adults. We have some really remarkable older adult programming that we do.
Like Alzheimer's and stuff like that?
Yes, memory care, and also older adults who may come from lower socioeconomic circumstances, and we will work with seniors at risk.
Mhm.
So if that's exciting for you and you want to support that, call us or email or get a hold of us, sheacenter.org. If you want to give, if you say, oh, I know someone who lives in that area who might want to be involved, there's your tie. Get a hold of us. We're happy to talk
Sure.
with somebody and connect them. It takes all of these T's, time, treasure, talent, ties, to make any nonprofit thrive. And if not the Shea Center, find the thing that really helps light you up, because it's proven, it's been studied. There's a wonderful case study from the Harvard Business School that I read their publication. And volunteerism does make you feel better. Helping someone else does make you feel better about yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's how you can help Shea. And if you have a private family foundation or your company has a foundation, all those things go to helping us sustain the work that we do to transform people's lives.
And I will have, for everybody listening, and I'll have it all in the description. I'll have your guys' email and your social media and all that stuff on there too. One question, and then we'll get to the last thing everybody's already dreading. What's the age limit to be a volunteer for everybody out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Minimum age is 14.
Okay.
That's it. And we've found generally that's a really great age. And it also for a lot of high schools, they require community service hours.
Volunteer hours. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sure. Okay, so here's the last thing, and not to make light of the subject, although it is what it is. So this is that time to tell the silly joke that we have, and you have one for me, and I don't know what it is, so I'm excited to let you tell it versus me telling one for once. So what's your joke?
So what's black and white and eats like a horse? A zebra.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I love that one. So that is actually the ideal joke for this thing, because all of mine are worse than that one, so it makes it better. So for everybody out there listening, as I say every week, obviously we're always looking for new jokes and for you guys to call in and tell the joke. So if you want your kids to tell a joke, or you've got a great joke, you just want to send it in for me to say it, I'll do that. And also, if you've got a subject like today's subject, which is so important to get out there so people know, send me an email to mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, MKYLE at FURREAL podcast.com. I'll get back to you regardless of anything. I can always use all the help that I can get. Dana, first off, thanks so much for taking the time. I learned some stuff today that I didn't know, even though I did some of the research, but you're doing wonderful things, and really, really, I know you're busy, and taking the time to be on this thing is really important to me. And I really, really appreciate it.
We really appreciate you giving us a voice to share this information and share the good work with people. And your podcast is delightful. I was not aware of it until you reached out to us, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you again. And for everybody out there, seriously, please keep following, pass the word out. The more people we get out there, the more information we get out there. And most importantly, from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much for listening. For real.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.